So good morning. My name is Mary Beth Baker. I'm an independent consultant, and I've worked extensively with UCSF over the last couple years, particularly helping them with some of their OE efforts. Julie and I have spent a lot of time together on the help desk consolidation. And I was asked by Elazar Harel and Mary Doyle, the CIO at Santa Cruz, to coordinate some of the campuses to come to this conference to present on some of their consolidation efforts. So that's been my role here. And it was interesting, as I was looking over the schedule, I saw one of the titles of one of the presentations tomorrow was Two Bears and a Horse, which inspired me to look to see what the mascots were for these campuses. And we have a triton, an anteater, and a bear. I was hoping to find some inspiration and wit to introduce them with, but didn't get very far. So maybe some of you can come up with a good joke for a triton, a bear, and an anteater, and how they collaborated. But anyway, we have some inspiration. Is that what I heard? We have a great group of presenters today. We have Julie Cox from UCSF. Julie has been in IT for over 40 years, although we certainly couldn't tell. She came to UCSF as part of the merger. Many of you may be familiar with the infamous merger between UCSF and Stanford back in 1997. She's directed the Med Center Service Desk and Identity and Access Management for the last 5 years, and Field Services for the last 2 years. In 2010, she was appointed the Director of UCSF IT Service Desk and has spent all of 2011 planning and completing that implementation. So she's here today to share those experiences and stories with you. We have Chuck Rose and Parrish Nnambi from UC San Diego. Chuck is the Help Desk and ResNet Manager, which is part of Academic Computing and Media Services, and Chuck has been at San Diego for 11 years. He's also a product of the UC system from Davis. And Parrish is the manager of network and BBiz systems, customer support, which is part of the administrative computing and telecom division, and has been at San Diego for the last 16 years. And then finally, we have a team from Irvine. Lyle Wiedeman has worked in a variety of technical and leadership positions at Irvine over the last 25 years. Has lots of stories to share with us, I'm sure. He's also a regular attendee and a strong supporter of the conference, which many of you may know that Irvine may be hosting the conference next year. And then Brian Buckler is the Director of Network, Desktop, and Infrastructure Services at Irvine, and he's been in higher ed IT for over 25 years, and including technical and managerial positions at Cal State Long Beach, as well as UCI. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn the presentation over to Julie. The way we have this structured is that each of the campuses will present, have 20 minutes to present. If you have some questions in between during their presentations, we'd like you to hold them until the end of their presentation. If there's time within that 20 minutes, we'll answer those questions. Otherwise, we're going to go through the 3 presentations, and at the end of the session, we'll have an open Q&A. Okay? Thank you.
And just, down? Yep. Okay. I have a tendency to stand too close to the mic, so if I get too loud, someone raise their hand or something like that. Good morning, everybody. I'm Julie Cox, and I'm really happy to be with you today. I've been giving similar type presentations for the last year and a half, and so I feel like this is the culmination, and hopefully the next presentation I give will be a totally different one. So the service desk, sorry, I have to get used to the logistics. The consolidation of the service desk at UCSF came from an initiative from the Chancellor for operational excellence. There were many different initiatives, many IT initiatives, and the first one that we moved forward with was the help desk. And we spent most of 2011 planning it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through kind of the context of what we did, the design, the implementation, some of the challenges within the implementation, the challenges within the service delivery model, what our lessons learned were, and critical success factors, and then talk about some of the advanced features. And I hope that I answer many of your questions during the presentation, but feel free to ask after. So we established 2 objectives when we did this, and the first one was to provide elevated and expanded services. We wanted to drive efficiencies through standardizations of processes, systems, and tools. And then the second one was a one-team approach. Here's where the collaboration comes into play, and to allow for transparency, quicker problem resolution through better collaboration and communication. From the first day I walked into UCSF, I heard common complaints from all of the physicians. Who do I call for this? Who do I call for that? With all the different help desks. And so one of the things we definitely wanted to address was the physician never having to, or any of the other customers, never having to know who to call. They had one number to call. So we started with the 4 main help desks, and the 4 main help desks were the medical center, and I actually came from the medical center. I was the service desk manager there, and then a campus help desk, and then the School of Medicine had their help desk ISU, and then also a portion of the School of Medicine was the team at San Francisco General. We based the consolidation on improving service, reducing cost, and improving efficiency. So the anticipated benefits were 24/7 support for everyone. The medical center had been delivering 24/7 support for a long time. Adding student support. Prior to this, there had been no real formal support for students. Providing a single point of contact, improving service, and lowering cost. So the first phase was these 4 main help desks, but a secondary phase is to look at all the individual departmental help desks across the organization and to bring those in. And a really important piece of consolidating the service desk is consolidating desktop support. And we are now, we've now begun that process, and Sion Shumway is the director leading that effort. And so doing the help desk without consolidating the desktop piece was definitely a challenge, but bringing on those individual other departments would be impossible without also doing the consolidating the desktop support for those individual departments. So we are in the second phase where we're consolidating the desktops. We're bringing in the help desk support as well at the same time. We started out with 29 people, and the commitment before we started was that halfway through the implementation, we would reduce staff by 2 FTEs, and then at the end of the consolidation, we would reduce by another 4. This was basically decided by information from different consultants, and so it was based on preliminary analysis and all of that. Well, I'll talk about that later, sorry. Services, the services that we were going to provide at the time of consolidation were the highest level of service performed for any of them. So what we didn't want to do was have anybody have a reduced level of service. The medical center had the highest level of service in many of the areas. School of Medicine had higher level service in a few components. So the idea was that you offer the highest level of service to everyone. And then we added the student support. The first thing we did was we relocated all the individual help desks to a single location. The medical center help desk was out at Candlestick Park, right next to, or at Executive Park, right next to Candlestick Park. And we were the only area that actually had room to expand. So the decision was made to move everybody there. The staff were going to remain in their own departments under their own budgets, but report up through me. And the only out-of-scope item we had was centralized provisioning. 2 of the 4 help desks provided provisioning to their customers. The medical center provisioning was done in a separate department. So the implementation was supposed to begin in November of 2010. We actually started at the end of January, and it was very dependent on the campus conversion over to ServiceNow. So the medical center and School of Medicine had been on ServiceNow for about a year. The campus was still on Remedy, and we insisted that everybody needed to be on the same incident management tool. So, so that was a primary dependency. And then we met the planned go-live date. It was planned for December 31st, 2011, and we actually went live on the 22nd of December. We wanted everybody to have a nice holiday. The implementation resources that we needed, first was a project manager, and we did end up only with about 20% of a resource, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. We hired an experienced transition consultant from a company called Computer Science Corporation, CSC, and he was available to us about 75% of the time. And we hired a documenter for our knowledge base. It was about the last 2 to 3 months just before we went live. We tried to hire a trainer. We couldn't find a resource we wanted, and time was running out. So we ended up using our existing supervisor and manager to do the training. And then we utilized the ServiceNow team at UCSF. The ServiceNow team is part of the campus. Rebecca Wynn is here, and she's the product manager for that team. And so we worked very closely with them on the development, the conversion of the campus over to ITSM. And then our implementation team included the project management, myself, and the managers of all the existing teams. So the manager of the help desk at the School of Medicine ISU, at San Francisco General, and on well, actually, there wasn't one on the campus side. There was an interim person on the campus side that spent some time with us. And then we brought in other existing resources to assist us in the PM, and I'll explain that in a few minutes, too. Sorry, this isn't lined up on mine. It was. So just to go over the cost of implementation, the ServiceNow implementation looks a little high, but this was not just for the service desk. This was also to bring change management up for across the whole organization, and continuing planning and development of the other modules for $827,000. The consulting was the limited amount that we spent on the project manager that didn't work out, as well as the transition analyst. For training, we brought in HDI to do some knowledge training for us for the knowledge base, and also we hired an outside company to develop an online basic training for Mac for us. We hired, and I'll talk about this later too, but we had some temporary staff and still do for the service desk, so that's the $120,000. Co-location expenses were $68,000. And then we had some software costs. OpenScape is our ACD, and it's part of the Siemens Pro Center product. And so that's how all the calls come into the service desk. So we had to buy additional licenses. And then each of the groups were on a different remote access tool, so we needed to consolidate that. And so we went out looking for a new tool, purchased Bomgar, and the cost of the software is in there. And then because the School of Medicine was primarily supporting Mac customers, but campus, DLS, and Medical Center were not, we needed to train all of our agents on Macs, and so we bought mini Macs for all of the agents. And so the total was about $1.5 million. So what were our challenges? And there were many. So the first challenge was project management. As I mentioned, we did hire a project manager that didn't really work out. And when we identified an internal resource, we could only get that internal resource for about 20% of the time. So we broke up the project plan into 10 different sections and put someone in charge of each one of those sections. And this worked out for the most part. One example was for the remote access tool. The manager for the campus desktop group volunteered for that, and so he took care of all the evaluation of the tools and collaborating among all the teams, negotiating the contract, installing the software, and so that's kind of how we laid out the different components to the project, and it's the only way we got it done. Another challenge, which continues to be a challenge until Sion does her magic and gets the desktop consolidated, is the decentralized desktop support. So we had to develop individual workflows within the knowledge base, and then we had to identify the desktop support by individual customers. For School of Medicine and San Francisco General, we needed to maintain very specific support levels because their customers, well, especially School of Medicine, their customers were paying for premium support, and we had to continue to provide that level of support. And so we created, we skilled a smaller team to handle these two groups, and training takes longer for this skill group, and it continues to be a challenge as certain workflows aren't that scalable. We also took on student support in the middle of the implementation. We determined that the student support was most similar to the campus, so we trained the campus agents to take those particular calls until we were consolidated. We worked closely with the library to handle on-site support. The calls would come into the service desk, we'd do our best to handle the call, and if we couldn't and they actually needed a face-to-face with someone to help them, then we would create a ticket for the library. We brought them up on ServiceNow early, and then they would make an appointment with the student and help them face-to-face. Another challenge was dropping the 2 FTEs mid-implementation. That meant taking on San Francisco General support as well as student support with 2 fewer people. And this really had less of an overall impact, was mostly handled by skill-based routing, which our ACD tool allows us to do. And then we had to drop 4 FTEs at go live, and we were unable to achieve this particular goal because of the volume increase and the complexity of the environment. And so we received agreement from the CIOs to reevaluate within 3 months. So the fact that ServiceNow was not implemented for the campus until the middle of November was a challenge for us because we were going live the middle of December, and we needed to have the campus agents become proficient on ServiceNow as well as learn all the new workflows. This also delayed the build of our knowledge base and the training of the staff. So we ended up putting all the workflows in the knowledge base and basically trained the staff on how to use the knowledge base. At that time, the knowledge base search was not very efficient, so that was a challenge as well. And we focused our training on that last week before go live. It was a slow week because of the impending holidays, so that worked out for us. And now, what are the challenges that we face with service delivery? We've been live 7 months now, and so we continue to face challenges. The different workflows, equipment, and service expectations for desktop support, as I mentioned, continues to be a challenge, and it affects our ability to be as efficient as we would like to be. We are continuing to develop our knowledge base. We brought in HDI for training, and we have adopted a knowledge-centered support. It focuses on, instead of the traditional method, which is you submit an article and you go through the approval process, it's as a result of problem solving, you create an article. And so we adopted a hybrid approach where not all of the agents are allowed to create articles, and also our support information, those articles have to go through the normal process of submitting and approving, getting approved. We purchased mini Macs for all the analysts, as I mentioned before, and we used an outside firm, V2 Consulting, to develop online Mac training for them. And one of the things that we've just embarked on is to reach out to our campus community. Again, this is another demonstration of collaboration, and ask for assistance both in training and in helping us to handle peak times, or if we have shrinkage that goes above 35%. And so we've gotten a lot of support from the community, and we're going to start setting up training to do that, and I can go over that a little bit more during the panel. We brought in a desktop resource at the service desk during peak times, so we got loaned a desktop person for morning hours, 8 to 12. Our peak times are 8 to 11, and so he's sitting in the service desk answering phones during that time to help us address those higher volume times. We also, it was determined by the CIOs that the highest priority service delivery would be to answer the calls in 60 seconds or less. And this is a challenge because we don't want to drop our first call resolution. That we want that to also be an objective of ours, to have a high first call resolution. And we can't increase our staff. So we're looking at different ways that we can achieve both of those. And then we have, we've had increased volume and inconsistency in the environment, and complexity in the environment continues to be a challenge. So we went back to the CIOs and demonstrated the increase in volume, and received approval for 6 temporary FTEs for 6 months. And then our volume has increased somewhere between 13 and 24%. And the reason for the discrepancy between those two numbers is I actually ran the report at the end of May, just before the medical center went live on Epic, and it showed a 13% increase in volume since our consolidation. And then I ran it at the end of July, and it came out 24%. But during the actual implementation of Epic and the command center and that kind of month of high volume of calls definitely has impacted that number. So I don't believe the 24% is accurate either. So hopefully in the next few months we'll get a better picture of our actual volume increase. As I mentioned earlier, staffing and managing peak times and time off continues to be a challenge. So we have several staff that have transitioned to newer and better jobs in the organization, and we've had one retiree. Training of new staff is always a challenge and can take a significant amount of time in the current complex environment. And then, as I mentioned, we're putting together this team across the enterprise that are willing to help step in during those peak times. So I thought I'd put in a picture of our service desk. This doesn't show the full expanse of it. The service desk area is actually about the size of this half of the room, and it's all very open. Everybody has desks that they can sit at or wind up and stand up at. And usually the environment has all the lights off because they like it to be dark and just use their local lamps. If you see in the upper right-hand corner up there, you'll see a board. This is our Simon board where we keep our cues. There's one on each side of the room, and it shows the cues by skill level. So you'll see that we have Apex is the name the medical center has for their Epic product. So we have an Apex queue. We have an Apex physician hotline right now that has a queue. The general queue is kind of everything else outside of the campus applications. And then we've got San Francisco and School of Medicine. And the reason San Francisco General and School of Medicine still have a queue is because they actually have their original help desk numbers, and those calls are forwarded, and so we can still capture the volume of calls coming in through there. As soon as those go away, everything will be reflected under the general queue. I thought I'd show you the organization. What we did is I report up through the medical center CIO, and we split it up into two teams. The medical center wanted to pay for a clinical service desk, and so I have a manager, Darlena Torres, who runs the clinical service desk, and they deal primarily with calls on the Epic EHR. And then I have a manager that's over the rest of the team, which is the generalist team. And we have it split up by the apps group, and then we have the skill-based group that supports School of Medicine and San Francisco General, and then kind of everybody else. And the two supervisors, they're not supervisors of staff, they're supervisors of the process. So they do the staffing, they manage the queue, and they manage the workflows and the processes. So lessons learned and critical success factors. Definitely hire a full-time project manager. I would not commit to reducing staff until your optimization period is complete. Agree on service level targets early on so you know exactly what you're working toward. I would hire a training and a documentation resource. Ensure all the tools are consolidated early enough before training begins. Now, this all sounds like, you know, pie, mom and apple pie, and in the real world it's probably not like that. But if you get to choose, these are what I would choose. Evaluate the complexities in the environment and set expectations early on. Revisit those during the implementation and the optimization. And I would begin the desktop consolidation earlier, so a majority of the planning occurs in parallel. And definitely you have to think outside the box. I think that's the only way it'll make it work. Quickly, some of the advanced features we have. 24/7 support for everyone. We just introduced ServiceNow Chat on August 1st. We have it in limited use right now, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and not for the medical center, but for everybody else. And so far, it's been pretty successful, so we're looking forward to expanding that. We're waiting for some additional enhancements from the vendor to make it a little bit better and better able to manage for us. Online submissions of tickets through our employee self-service, offering average hold time of a minute or less. If you go online and you can actually see in the employee self-service, you can request to see your open tickets, and it'll present your tickets to you. And then there's a new ITS, which is the campus website, and it links right into the employee self-service option for chat or online submission, and you can leave a voicemail within 30 seconds. So let me quickly show you the ITS website. If you take a look at under Tools on the right-hand side where it says Get IT Help, and you press that button, and then it takes you to the employee self-service page. Up in the right-hand corner, you'll see Service Desk Chat, and it'll give the hours of operation, and right below it, it has View My Tickets. And then you hit Get IT Help, which goes into the actual online submission form. And then below that are just some of the service catalog items. We haven't really developed a full service catalog. We just have a small number of items there. Questions? John?
Julie, since this implementation 2 years ago, since we first started that operational service desk committee, do you have a rough guess of how many staff hours? I know this is a big question.
Wow.
Everybody involved in this process?
Oh.
Is it 2,000?
Yes. So the question is, we started the process at the beginning of operational excellence with committees that actually came together to determine how this would work, how it would be organized and set up, and then of course the implementation. And John is asking the question: do I have any idea of how many hours, staff hours, were spent on this project. And I don't have a clue, but there were a ton. I would say thousands. Yes?
Related to the chat function,
Uh-huh.
do the analysts work in a multitasking environment where they're operating multiple chats at once, or a chat at the same time that they're working on a phone call? And then next question along that same line would be, does the system push the next person in queue? For instance, is it integrated so that they get a call and then they'll get a chat and all of that activity is pushed to them, as opposed to picking?
Okay. So the question is about the chat function and whether or not they multitask with the chat or a combination of chat and phone call. And to answer that question first, right now we have generally an agent that is dedicated to chat. And if he doesn't have any chats, then they may take a phone call, and then we'll bring someone else in. They do handle multiple chats, but we try not to mix a chat with a phone call, because the phone call requires a lot of dedicated listening and all of that. The second question, tell me the second question again, sorry.
No problem. So some systems will push, they'll manage the activity, and they'll blend the chat, they'll blend emails, they'll blend the incoming calls, and then they'll push whatever activity is next based on when that came in.
Okay, well, the chat is handled separately, and one of the enhancements we're looking for, because right now you have to keep checking the chat queue, and so there's no alert that there's a new chat in there, so that's not as efficient for us. But no, it doesn't. Now, I don't know whether it's capable of doing that. Rebecca, do you know?
So we're using the chat function from ServiceNow, which is completely separate from the phone system.
Right.
So we have to look to see that integration. Right now, it isn't.
Okay, so right now it's just managing the chat by itself. Yes?
Can you say a little bit about the present and future role of students in the organization? And can you, the second question is, what metrics are you using to measure effectiveness, maybe as opposed to efficiency?
So the question is the current and future role of students, and are you talking about within the service desk? I don't know that I can answer the question on the service desk, the future role of the students. Right now, our student calls are, a lot of them are connectivity issues and that we're able to handle. I don't know if we'll have improved level of service in the service desk or not. We had talked about potentially having kiosks around near the students where they could come and actually just bring their laptops. I think that's going to be more of a function of the library technical staff that we will coordinate with, but not that we would actually do that. We've talked about whether we would ever have student volunteers to help at the service desk, but we haven't really pursued that one either. Does that answer your question? Oh, is provide, okay. So right now they're not providing service. We have not asked any of the students to provide service. We're a graduate university only, and so most of the students are in graduate programs and they're all pretty busy, but we have talked about it. We just haven't gone there yet. And your other question was? Measuring metrics for effectiveness as opposed to efficiency. Okay, so the metrics that we have today, we run many different reports. So we run a weekly report. It's a trend report that shows volume of calls, and it shows volume of calls by the queues that we can measure it by. It shows average hold times, average abandon percentages, and first contact resolution, and we're doing some level 1 resolution. We can't do that on every one of them, but we're doing it on some of them. And so that report is sent out every week. I've just gotten a report that actually is looking at talk times, and it shows the talk times that are less than 5 minutes, between 5 and 10, 10 and 15, 15 and 20. And 80% of the calls are handled within 5 minutes. But we have about 16% of the calls handled 20 minutes or more, and that's one of the areas that I now have to address in order to achieve the 60-second hold time. So that's, we have that, and then we have surveys to people. We also get out to different groups. We have an IT forum that we usually present at and get feedback from people. So does that answer your question? Those are mostly what we're measuring today.
I'm going to give you the hook.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, we want to hear from our Tritons. I'm going to turn it over to Parrish and Chuck, and while I'm doing the handout, I'm going to leave you guys here. I assume that the first couple slides we can handle without me.
Let's give it up for Julie.
Yes, let's definitely give it up for Julie. I'm going to go hand these out. I'm sure you'll have enough time to chat.
Well, welcome. Chuck and I are going to talk briefly about 3 different consolidations that took place. As you can see above there, you can see they deal with 3 different departments, but they are primarily focused around the first one, which is ACS. Just to give you a little bit of background, ACS is primarily focused around the students' instructional type support. ACT has a primary focus of faculty and staff, and the media services is a classroom technology type of focus. The 3 areas or 3 timeframes we're going to talk about, 2005 was mainly a intra-department consolidation of help desk within ACS. In 2007 was a network services consolidation, and in 2009 was the merger of 2 departments. Well, we're going to start with 2005. So some of the service consolidations, we are basically going to talk about 5 help desks that basically kind of went into one being instructional computing, lab and service, room operations, computer repair and installation, that was a recharge type of situation, residential networking, and networking services. Now, some of the reason for this were various reasons. Most were efficiency. To give you examples, we had probably 4 or 5 locations for the different help desks, spread over a couple of floors in different areas. We had multiple points of contact. Was another thing. We had duplication of services. As far as phone systems, we had different phone systems for all those different groups. We also had email addresses. One of the biggest things is each group was kind of individual in a silo in their own, so communication wasn't that great, which in turn caused problems when you say you're at the wrong help desk, you need to go to this one, and that type of thing. Some of the benefits we were looking at were basically improved customer service, improved staff experience, and cost savings, and a central customer database. And now going into a little more detail, we're going to have Chuck.
Thanks, Parrish. Good morning. I should probably warn you guys just so you don't end up calling 911 or something. I stutter, and so if I get hung up on a word or anything, I'm probably not having a stroke or a heart attack, and just give me a couple minutes, I'll get through it. The support model we were pursuing was a unified help desk with 1 email address, 1 phone number, and 1 walk-up desk, and would be using a consolidated customer database and a new phone system. The new help desk would also be located on the first floor of our building as opposed to various locations in the building. Implementation required us to remodel one of the existing help desks to make room for 4 additional units, going from 6 career staff and 5 student staff to approximately 15 career staff and more than 25 student staff. The extra space needed required us to get additional space from campus and relocate several other groups in our department. The remodel also included improving our walk-up customer location, creating a true walk-up counter as opposed to a desk behind a door. A committee was put together that evaluated new ticket tracking softwares, and we transitioned over to Numera footprints. We also upgraded our phone system. This process took approximately 8 months' time, which included about 4 months of planning, 3 months of remodeling, and about a couple months of training and move-in. Next slide. We identified one person as a help desk manager, but unlike a typical consolidation, our reporting structures stayed the same for the various units. Though irregular, this arrangement worked via extensive communication and a collaborative effort from each unit involved. The success of this can also be attributed to the manager, who instead of trying to control and dictate, really looked for ways to build bridges, listen, and be inclusive of the other leaders. That was Parrish, by the way. He did a great job. Differing procedures and policies were resolved by a collaborative rewrite, using the existing policies and procedures as a base. The various styles and cultures of each group were joined through training that involved leaders from each unit. The merged help desks were very successful, with only a few hitches. Centralizing the computer drop-off and pickup created more problems than it helped. And so we ended up moving that back to the original group and location. We initially tried to include everyone in the same footprints project interface, but groups that needed only a few variables were overwhelmed by the other variables needed by other groups. This was resolved by creating different interfaces for each of the groups. Our front desk is located almost directly next to the first floor lobby, which is great for exposure. Unfortunately, it's also located right next to the men's bathroom and the elevators. Though never entirely eradicated, this problem was lessened by training our front desk staff to more quickly triage and ask for help from other staff when the lines got long.
I just want to give you a little warning. You're all part of a double header here with the back-to-back session. We had originally intended for you to have a bit of a break between the presentations, but I don't think that we're gonna have that time. We'll try to give you at least a 5-minute break before the next one, but if you need to get up and go grab coffee, please feel free to do so. No one will take offense. Sorry.
Okay. So we're going to move on to 2007. This is basically a department merger of networking services. This was too for efficiency. We had a couple of cases. One, on campus, we had a centralized networking group and security group. We had 2 of those. We also had cases of providing that background network and wireless support, except they were at different levels. So for the first tier, you would call this group. For the second tier, you would call another group. So these are some other reasons why we look to consolidate. There were also cases of, with the ACS network operations, there were some applications or services that would be better provided in a more central type atmosphere. Customer confusion was really big. You know, campuses are all about acronyms, and back then we had ACS and ACT, and people would call and like, well, I called you, what's the difference? Why do I have to talk to that other group? And to add some complexity to that, our phone numbers, the last extensions were very small. To give you an example, 1853 and 1857. So we found a lot of reasons to simplify things. The benefits was basically to kind of help bring together that central community as far as the networking, the services, and the security group. but we also wanted that clear communication with the customers so that they would understand the difference between ACT and ACS. Support model was one of looking for more resources and technology. You figure being part of a bigger group that is kind of meant to support that, there are more options and things available for everyone. This also gave us an opportunity to centralize the campus AD Forest. In the beginning, shall we say, this was done through ACS/network operations, but it was campus-wide. The implementation, the resources involved with that, once again, we had to get with campus to get some additional space. We had an office renovation, cost about $10K, furniture $42K, and once again, we looked at ticketing software and went with Numara footprints. This is something that my group had looked into earlier when we were with ACS, and we had already actually had some groups within ACT using it as a side note, so it was easy to implement that into this new organization. As you see, it took about 4 months to fully implement. That's 2 months of planning. The remodeling was about 1 month, and then training was another month or 2 to get things going and up to speed. Challenges. We did have a challenge. One of our challenges was having enough ACT help desk staff to help with the ACS help desk. Now, to add some clarity to that, basically there were services there by ACT, which were the central computing, the networking services, hostmaster, postmaster, creating accounts. Those were done by ACT. When we started this, we had 1 person scheduled per day to help with those. We quickly found that that wasn't enough. It also wasn't an option for us to provide a separate help desk at the central location for ACT. So what we wound up doing there is working with ACS in a collaborative effort to basically have them, we provide them funding and they provide the services that we have. On the back end, that means constant communication, training, and other means to make sure that they have the tools they need to get things done. Knowledge sharing. That was actually pretty easy on the ACT side because what we did as a model to begin with was basically if you got a phone call and you had no idea what it was, you talked to one of the staff that did. And it went vice versa because you're talking administrative and networking, which were combined. So you had strictly phone service, then you had various levels of networking service. So that worked out great. Service delivery. I kind of went those in reverse order, but that's all right.
That's all right.
I kind of blended things together with the service delivery, and that's just reflecting back on having people man the the ACS help desk with ACT. I'm going to have Chuck go into 2009.
Okay, so the third and latest collaboration and consolidation. About the same time we were trying to figure out how to work together between our 2 help desks. The directors of ACS and Media Services began working on a podcasting project together, which led to talks about the ways that their respective departments shared a focus on instructional technology, especially as media was becoming more and more digital. Like models existed at other schools and UC campuses, encouraged the discussion, as did talks of budget cuts. With one director retiring soon, eMERGE would save the campus money and hopefully reduce the need for layoffs within each department. In 2009, ACMS and Media Services merged and began discussions on how they could improve efficiency. This led to a decision to merge the two help desks, which included reevaluating the remnants of the help desk from the changes that had happened a couple years earlier, and look at merging the groups that provided support to the classrooms, namely the classroom media staff and the lab support staff, both groups having experience and responsibilities with classroom technology, projectors, audios, podcasting, things like that. In addition to the cost reduction from combined leadership, it was believed that having the two groups working together would be more efficient and effective as they shared resources and ideas, and that the experience for customers would once again be improved. Once again, the desired model was a single help desk, but this time with different levels of service. Only media support for special events was excluded from the merge, as it was the only recharge service and required different resources. Creating a better environment for both staff and customers was also critical. Implementation required us to make significant modifications to the existing help desk, once again, to improve workflow for the expanded group of people, and the now 30+ student staff rotating through. Our new media services staff was a major boon in helping identify ways to improve the acoustics in the remodeled space. This merge took most of 2 years and involved almost 1 year of planning and meetings before and after the merge, 3 months of renovation, and about 1 month of training. I mentioned a couple years because even though we officially merged in 2009, the first year involved almost zero change and just allowed the groups to meet together and really talk about ways to effectively merge. Since the merge involved a couple entire departments and about 80 career staff and 30 student staff, we used a number of human resource consultants in helping us with the transition, including developing a new mission statement. The cultural differences between the two departments were recognized and identified early on. Seeing them as opportunities for growth and talking about specific ways the two cultures would be able to enjoy one another's strength via Sorry, guys. Meeting as a whole, both in large groups and in small groups, really helped us with those initial differences. The challenge of having different policies and procedures was met by a collective review and update. Calls from classrooms and labs needed a faster response than other help desk calls, which could afford to wait in a queue. Minor modifications in our phone system were made to create a hotline for new services that needed a more urgent response, and senior staff were assigned to answer those lines. Media Services was not used to assigning the higher level responsibilities that were given to existing student staff at the help desk. Before making the changes, media staff were able to observe how the existing student staff handled higher level responsibilities successfully. Instead of jumping in head first, support for media services was transitioned to students in stages. With help desks taking on a wider range of responsibilities, we knew we would need more staff and were able to create a couple new positions, some funded by other departments like ACT. The only issue we ran into as we put everything in place was discovering asbestos in the floors as we were remodeling, which made the process take longer. As you can imagine, the solution to this was being flexible and adaptive, something I think help desk people generally excel at.
Lessons learned. The communication is essential at all levels, specifically with the people that are impacted by this. There was a lot of great effort put into the collaboration so that was mutually beneficial to everybody, to all that was involved. We wanted to encourage the collaboration and cooperation also with our customers. There was feedback that was gathered over time, either through online surveys or write-up little card you could fill out to get that feedback to let us know if what we did was the right thing. Attitude about change is very important. It really helped that senior management, middle management were all on board and supporting all of these efforts. Because at times it was tiresome, it was, is there an end? But the fact that, you know, management was saying, we believe in you, we want this to succeed, and we did. Basically, this slide is the same as the handout you have. I would ask for questions, but maybe we'll save that for the Q&A part so that you guys can get a quick 5-minute break if we have time. Thank you.